Kedves barátaim! A következő interjú Jane Bürgermeister-rel készült. Ő az a, nyugodtan mondhatom, hős, aki hihetetlen bátorsággal és éleslátással göngyölítette fel azt a nemzetközi összeesküvést, melynek az eredménye a mostani sertésinfluenza hisztéria. Ő az, aki feljelentette az Egyesült Államok jelenlegi és előző elnökét, az Egészségügyi Világszervezet igazgatónőjét, az ENSZ vezetőjét, az oltóanyaggyártó cégek, úgy mint Baxter, Novartis, a GlaxoSmithKline és a Sanofi-Aventis vezetőit, Rockefeller és Rothschild bankárokat és még sok más személyt a nemzetközi elittől. Feljelentésében több mint 100 oldalon világosítja meg e szervezetek emberiség ellenes összeesküvését. Jelen interjú körülbelül 50 perces és kritikus információkat tartalmaz arról, hogy mi is történik jelenleg a világban. Kérlek benneteket, nézzétek végig, és küldjétek tovább a lehető legtöbb embernek. A jelenlegi válságot csak egy jól informált és tudatos társadalom tudja jelentős veszteségek nélkül megoldani. És ez minden egyes ember személyes felelőssége. A tiéd is.
This is Bill Ryan from Project Camelot, and I am here in Vienna on the 8th of September 2009. I happen to be in Vienna because I just returned from a conference in Poland, and I have just met Jane Bürgermeister, who up until now has been a figure shrouded in mystery. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you visually to the world here by being the first person in the internet community to have made a trail to find out. And here I'm going to make a joke, whether you really exist or not, and I can demonstrate to everyone that you truly do. What, may I ask Jane, was your response when you realized that you had an opportunity to basically to give a message to the world on camera, which is what I want to support you in being able to do?
Well, thank you, Bill, for, as I say, taking the trouble to come all the way here. And it's a bit off the beaten track here in Vienna. It is, however, a significant place, as it turns out. It is the place where Baxter contaminated 72 kilos of vaccine material with the live bird flu, and so nearly triggered a global pandemic just a few months ago in February. This attempt to trigger a pandemic failed because of the alertness of people in the Czech Republic who detected it in a laboratory in biotest. However, it has now turned out that Baxter still has at least a large amount of that 72 kilos of bird flu, and we're coming to a point where we have only perhaps a few weeks until the government here in Austria and other governments around the world intend to start injecting people with so-called swine flu vaccine material, which we have every reason to fear is going to be a big hazard to our health, and has been designed to be a hazard to our health, even if it isn't contaminated with the live bird flu virus, as it might well be. So my message that I want to give to people, if I can give any message, is that time is running short, that we all of us now have to recognize the scale of the threat and danger to us individually and collectively, and we need to take steps and organize to stop this mass vaccination program as soon as possible.
And as we were discussing when we were just chatting before we started this video interview, you feel a tremendous sense of urgency, don't you? This is driving you right now.
Well, unfortunately, we have seen how, in spite of mounting and growing protests in the USA and now in Europe, the latest polls show that 29% of the Germans are categorically going to refuse the swine flu vaccine. In spite of all that, the governments are pressing ahead relentlessly. WHO is pushing with tremendous determination this unwanted, unnecessary and dangerous program on us. And it's coming in just a few weeks.
What's interesting to me is that we, like you, get reports from all over the world, and it seems that governments in every first world nation, and maybe other nations too, seem to be preparing in almost like marching in step with this thing. This is coordinated, isn't it?
Absolutely, and if you look at the legal framework, they are all following the same legal framework, and it's the International Health Regulations of 2005, which give WHO, the World Health Organization based in Geneva, the power to control how governments respond to this pandemic, which WHO has itself declared. And every country has a more or less identical pandemic plan, which hands power over to the World Health Organization, which allows the World Health Organization to take over the police and the health forces. And every country will set up a crisis committee, which will determine, what vaccine centers are established, what groups are going to be targeted for vaccination, and so on. And that is the reason why it's so coordinated and synchronized, because there is a single body behind it, and this is the World Health Organization, the UN, and the people who back that, the banking cartel and family dynasty, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds.
Now, let's just back up a moment here, and for those people watching this video who don't know who you are and why we should be talking here in Vienna, can you just give a little bit of your background? The things that you shared with me personally, for instance, I didn't even know that you were at university in Edinburgh, how long you've been in Vienna, what you're doing here, and just a little bit of a bio. How did you get to this place? Sometimes you must wake up in the morning asking yourself the same question. How did you get here?
Well, my dad is Austrian, and my mother is from Ireland, and I was born in Switzerland. And I went to Edinburgh University, where I did English literature and language, and a bit of philosophy and so on. And I came to Austria in the year 2000, and I started working here as a medical journal or as an editor for a medical journal, specializing in diabetes. And I quit that of my own free will and started writing for medical wires, Reuters Health, for the British Medical Journal, The Scientist, Nature, and so on. And so I acquired an understanding of the medical field and how to do research in this area. And then I eventually moved into renewable energy because I believe it's a tremendous potential for humanity. Until one day, this winter, a neighbour showed me the report in a local newspaper saying that Baxter had contaminated this vaccine material, and 36 people had to go to hospital to be treated preventatively for the bird flu. And then, of course, I understood this was a tremendous threat, and that because biosafety level 3 regulations are in place in these sort of facilities, it can't have been an accident.
So your experience gained as a medical journalist immediately helped you to realise that something very unusual and important had happened here, is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also felt confident about doing the research into it and filing charges, which I did eventually. Because of that background, I had done quite a lot of work in that field, so I felt confident I could handle it.
Okay, now, something which I do want to ask you is that many people have understandably asked the question, who is this woman and where does she come from out of nowhere? And I can resonate with that, because people say that about us, and people feel sometimes an understandable sense of territoriality. It's like, wait a minute, this is my area, or wait a minute, I've been researching this for 20 years, or where's this newcomer come from? Now, were you conscious of the fact that when you started to write about this stuff, people would be saying, who is this person? I've never heard her name before.
I have to be honest and say my concern was to try and stop and publicize what I saw as a big crime and threat. I was very concerned that there was no publicity, no action being taken by the Austrian government, and that Baxter could release this material the day after.
And it should have been news headlines all over the world.
Absolutely.
It was underwhelming, wasn't it?
It was underwhelming, and that created the risk that they were just going to repeat the same maneuver and